Winter is coming.
This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com, with your hosts, Tyson Gifford and William Roerick. Episode 151, recorded April 13th, 2018.
You're goddamn right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TVEnthusiast.com. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at TVE, William Roerick.
Hello.
So today we're primarily going to be talking about Legion, the first two episodes that have been out so far, but we're also going to talk a little bit earlier about two shows that I've been kind of watching, one a revival and one a new show that I think kind of deserve a little bit of attention. So we're going to talk about those first, then we're going to go into Legion and talk about that as best we can, because this season went even weirder than it was before. So we're going to hang on by a thread trying to find out how we can talk about that show, but that might end up being the best discussion possible. We'll see. Let's start things off, though, with the two shows I'd mentioned before. I'm going to start off with AP Bio. So AP Bio is a show about a professor from Harvard who he loses his position and ends up having to teach biology at a high school, even though he's a professor of philosophy. What I ended up liking about this show so much and why I think it's so good is that the teacher, the main character, he does not give a fuck. Is the best way. He immediately, right from the beginning, is like, we're not going to be doing biology. We're not even going to be studying anything. All we're going to be doing is trying to get revenge on my rival.
Okay, I've heard that. I've heard people criticize the show, saying that it's just him playing Dennis in a different show.
You could say that, but I mean, I just think the show's really good. I think the cast of ensemble characters is really good. Patton Oswalt playing the principal is really good. The kids are really good. There's this one girl in particular with these like bottle glasses, you know, that magnify her eyes and make them look huge, who's hilarious. There's this like the kid that's supposed to be like the kind of like the dark kid, you know, like the one that's picked on and stuff, that's like really funny. And it just like the characterization of these kids that because it's AP Bio, this isn't like a regular bio class. These are like the kids that really want to learn, and the teacher is just not receptive to that at all, and just wants like, you know, to come up with plans to get his rival in trouble or create problems for his rival. I mean, the last episode they were talking about getting some of his DNA so that they could frame him for murder. And they were doing it. The kids were doing it because they found out that if they did this, they could maybe create a win-win situation with the teacher where they could actually learn some biology while they were doing it. Oh. And he was like, I like the whole part about framing, but not about the whole learning biology thing. And every time they got more into like making molecular displays and stuff, he was like, no, I thought I could trust you kids. I thought you were good kids, but you were bad kids trying to learn biology. So yeah, I think it's actually really, really, really funny. Probably the best new comedy of the year, at least for me so far. It's interesting because the It's Always Sunny alumni are all kind of like seem to be kind of getting into some funny stuff. So it's you know, Dennis from It's Always Sunny is in this show, and then what's the girl's name on I don't know her character's name. Caitlin Olsen's character.
Shoot, I don't know.
Isn't it D or something like that?
D, that's it.
She's on the Mick, which is really funny too. But that was like a funny show from last year. So I wonder if we're just going to start seeing like all of the It's Always Sunny people like leading up their own comedies. One of them's been getting into movies, so we'll see how that goes. But so far, I've liked both of the alumni shows, so to say. I just wanted to bring that up. Yeah, check that out if you get the chance, because it's really funny. And
okay, sure.
The other show I wanted to bring up is Roseanne. So Roseanne is like the long anticipated reboot. There have been a bunch of reboots recently. Some of them kind of are like big deals. Twin Peaks was a big deal. Roseanne is a big deal. Some of them less so, like Fuller House or Will and Grace, you know, kind of like less of a big deal. But Roseanne has been getting a lot of press attention, just even leading up to its return, because, you know, Roseanne Barr herself is is a Trump supporter.
Yeah.
And she made the assertion that Roseanne and Dan would be Trump supporters, which kind of makes sense. Like they kind of fit into that demographic that they might be Trump supporters.
Right.
A lot of the nervousness that people had was that Roseanne Barr herself being a Trump supporter in a show that's like a kind of bringing back, playing on nostalgia, might be like a mouthpiece for like Trump propaganda.
Right.
That's not really the case.
I've seen some pretty awful people praise the show, so I don't know. But
they're praising the show just because she's a Trump supporter that has a show.
Right.
It's like there have been like stuff coming out about how Donald Trump called her up and was supporting her, and everything that was like talked about was about her ratings, basically. So it's like I don't even think he watched it himself.
Right.
I think if he watched it himself, he might not have liked it because it does kind of paint a more fair image. Like it kind of shows both sides of the debate, and it's less about what Trump is doing himself and who Trump is himself, and it's more about the way families are divided and the way you'd have somebody in the family that's pro-Trump, that, you know, and how that could cause like this rift in the family with somebody who's anti-Trump because there's like no middle ground for these people.
Right.
That's kind of more what Roseanne's about than about Trump himself. So like they make references to the wall and to a nasty woman, you know, and like all these kind of like things, like it comes up in references, but it's more about this kind of feud that had developed between Roseanne and her sister Jackie, with Roseanne basically having bullied Jackie into not voting for Hillary, and then Jackie feeling regret, thinking that she's somehow somewhat responsible for Trump getting into office. And that caused like a big feud between the two of them. And when the show begins, Darlene is moved back home in with Dan and Roseanne, and like immediately kind of tries to pull the two sisters back together and stuff. And so that's kind of it kind of addresses it pretty quickly, and it starts addressing some other issues or stuff, like one of Darlene's kids is gender fluid,
right.
And so it's going into that, but it doesn't handle it like in this political mouthpiece kind of way at all. It's more like in a very family way. But I think it ends up kind of being to its benefit. Like, I have to kind of give her credit for, you know, her being responsible for the show. I mean, because I had a suspicion that it might be okay, because as right-wing or as pro-Trump as Roseanne is, the other cast members, a lot of them have been very anti-Trump, like publicly anti-Trump, including John Goodman, who plays Dan in the series, who appeared in, he was Rex Tillerson in Saturday Night Live, in the Saturday Night Live skits that were making fun of
I
Donald
remember
Trump.
that. Yeah, I remember that.
So, like, you know, he's actively making fun of Trump on Saturday Night Live, along with like Alec Baldwin. So, you know, it's not going to be too right-wing leaning, because he wouldn't do it, you know, if it went against his convictions that much. But so it seems to kind of like find a good balance there, and be more about kind of like families.
Right.
So I just kind of wanted to put that out there for anybody like me who was kind of like, do I watch this? Like, you know, is this just going to be a political mouthpiece bullshit? Like, what is this going to be problematic? You know, it's like, no, it's really not.
So would you say you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it's funny. It feels a lot like Roseanne. I mean, it nails it. It's Roseanne again.
Oh, cool. All right.
So yeah, and like Roseanne, they bring up politics a little bit, but not much. It's not that big of a part of the show.
Right.
I think that helps as well. So yeah, that's my bit on Roseanne. So check that out if you got the chance, if you were worried about it being too political, too pro-Trump. It really, really isn't. Her character is, but the show itself isn't.
Right.
Now let's move on to our main topic of the night, which is Legion. So we're going to be talking about the first 2 episodes of season 2.
It's a trip. It's a total trip. Like,
well, the funny thing is like the first season was all like about like what's really going on. And because of that, like everything that was trippy kind of had this place of like, okay, well, you're supposed to kind of not know what's real and what is. And that's not so much the case in season 2. Like, you're not really questioning what's real anymore, but it's even trippier since season 1 was even with that the case.
Are you not questioning what's real? I don't know what's real.
I don't think I question it that much. I think that what side people are on and what's going on is a lot clearer than it was in season 1.
I'm just paranoid that like even stuff like that they show us that could be real, they could just flip that on its head at any point.
They
because
could.
of how it's set up. You know,
they very well could. I don't think that's what they're doing though. I think they're pretty much playing it a bit more straightforward with the general plot, but the presentation has just gone way trippier.
Yeah, the presentation is way trippier. Yeah.
So one of the first things kind of I wanted to bring up is, what do you think about the John Hamm narrated bits?
I like them. They're cool.
It's like at first it was in the first episode, it was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then it's like, oh, this is a thing. Like, I guess every episode's going to have this like this segment or something.
Well, it's a thing up to the second episode. Who knows if it's going to be in every episode? But yeah,
it seems that way right now. Like I wasn't expecting it to be in the second episode after the first one.
Right,
so
me neither.
I'm like, oh, okay, they're actually doing a little bit more with this than just like a one-off.
The thing about like, well, it's like little bits about mind and perception, right? Like
it's almost like a scholarly article with like trippy visual presentation.
It shows like Oliver teaching this kid that red is green and green is red.
Yeah.
And then he said, and then because he gave him backwards knowledge about those two colors, he sets him up to get hit by a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, he gives him backward knowledge about which color is which, but then the correct knowledge of, you know, which means stop and which means go.
Yes, exactly.
You know, if you say red means stop and green means go, and he thinks red is green and green is red, then it's the same as telling him that green is stop and red is go.
Right, exactly. It is. So, I mean, the point that segment was trying to make is like, that's like your perception of reality. Like, if that's what you're taught, that's reality to you. Mm-hmm. So like, and I think it was prefaced with like a wise man once said, what's real is what still exists when you stop believing in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had the bit with the Chinese man that was the monk, that dreamed he was a butterfly.
So that was to underscore the reality, right? Because he taught the kid wrong about the colors, and then because his reality was that green was red, red was green, the actual reality was the opposite, and that's why he got hit by the car.
Yeah. Even before that, like in the first episode, they went into like a whole thing about how to plant a delusion, how to plant and foster a delusion.
Yeah.
And it showed this metaphor with like two eggs, and one like a chick hatches and the other something that maybe rivals the weird creature from Twin Peaks.
Here's the thing, I'm sure it's like a deformed tar chicken.
Yeah.
Like
it's a Demogorgon.
They were because they were using chickens to illustrate it, I guess, chickens and eggs. And so like a healthy normal chicken is a normal idea, then this deformed tar chicken is a delusion. But I think these things tie into the plot in some way. Like I think they're meant to illuminate some points of the plot. It's just not very clear.
Yeah, which I mean, when you have a plot where the main character is somebody who questions his sanity, and you have characters that are capable of manipulating what you think is or isn't real, then like having kind of like an explainer like this, it's kind of entertainingly presented, is interesting to the plot because it's like it's giving you an idea of maybe of how the Shadow King works,
right?
Like how he manipulates somebody, because he can't just like, you know, oh, I'm just gonna push a bunch of power and manipulate. It's how he's more subtle and careful about how he manipulates situations to create what he wants.
Right, exactly.
He can't just do whatever he wants, like with absolute power. Like he has to be tricky.
Right, he has to be tricky. He has to manipulate people into doing what he wants. And so those are methods he uses. Speaking of that, it seems like the plot is they've joined Section 13 now. Mm-hmm. And they're looking for the Shadow King, and the Shadow King is looking for his body. And the thing that they point out is like, if he finds his body, he'll be all powerful.
Yeah, he'll be unstoppable, they say.
Yes. And then Legion is supposedly visited by his girlfriend from the future, and she informs him that he has to help the Shadow King. We don't find out till a second encounter that apparently she says she's from a different timeline, and that he ends up killing the Shadow King
like a week later or something.
Like a week later,
timeline,
and then something even worse comes along and they can't stop it, and it nearly wipes out all life on the planet. And so her argument is that they need the Shadow King to stop whatever's coming.
My speculation is that the thing that's worse is David himself.
That's my speculation, yeah. Because we know
there was like some kind of like weird facing around the idea of like when he asked if he was still alive, and she was kind of like sort of like kind of was her response, you know?
Yeah,
or
and
like,
also she says something to the effect of, I didn't expect to see you like this again, like this, like, and he's like, and you ask like how what, well, his first instinct is like, what, dead? And she doesn't like confirm that. She doesn't she's like, sort of, so real cagey. Like, she doesn't give a straight answer.
In the comics, it's worth noting that Legion is completely insane, and also he's an Omega level mutant. So he's like one of the most powerful entities in the entire Marvel universe, basically.
Yeah, he's one of the most powerful entities in the Marvel universe.
He can basically rewrite reality.
Yeah, he can basically rewrite reality. So it is possible for Legion to become that kind of a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And that does seem to be what they're hinting at.
Yeah, I believe so as well. That's kind of what I took
from
it.
And if you think about it, then it would make sense that the Shadow King would probably be one of the few mutants who could stand up to him.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, but only with that power, because they make a few points to show that David, Legion, even being not at his full power, only like having like the faintest grasp over what he can do, because this is all new to him, that he has control over this, is already like, at least far more powerful than the Shadow King is without his body. And that was always kind of questionable, but they had in the first episode, they had this kind of dance battle thing, and it ends like it's kind of interesting because like the dance battle is supposed to represent like a psychic battle between David and then the combined forces of Oliver and Lenny.
Yeah.
And it's kind of showing like the different way that they use it. Like Lenny's more like seductive in her methods, and Oliver's more like flamboyant or absurdist. Like he's making more like kind of wild movements and stuff. And then David is very like hard. Like he like smashes his arms together and stuff. And the dance spell basically ends with you seeing like a shockwave from him doing that, like blowing across the faces of Lenny and Oliver.
Right.
Showing that he just basically overpowered them.
Right. Exactly.
And we know that he was able to kick out the Shadow King from his head, where he'd been like nesting since he was a child. So there's like, there's a lot of stuff going on there about like David is just, he's more powerful than the Shadow King is now. But they also made a good point in the second episode of really showing they had a meeting between David and the real Shadow King, not like one of the faces he uses.
Right.
And in that meeting, the Shadow King makes a good point to say, like, to basically prove that even though you are more powerful, you're not as skilled.
Right.
And it's kind of demonstrating that, like in showing kind of like the ways a mental battle can work. Like it shows them like wrestling each other, and then the Shadow King's like, you're playing the wrong game or something, and then all of a sudden he's like a samurai with a sword.
Right.
And David takes that example and becomes a tank.
It becomes a tank.
But then the Shadow King shows kind of the ultimate out of that is like he can be a force without mass.
Right.
Like a storm.
A storm.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like and then he kind of snaps David out of it and kind of shows like he has more control over what he can do than David does. It's an interesting like little kind of like lesson for David in a sense, David's been kind of using like brute force this whole time.
Right, exactly. So David's got to be more clever, in his tactics.
That it makes it interesting because now like the Shadow King is like his mentor. Besides that, we have David adjusting to life at Section 13, where he is immediately kind of weirded out by and expressing the audience kind of bemusement at the kind of the leader of Section 13, who is this kind of man who wears a basket over his head, followed around by 3 women with mustaches.
Robots.
Yeah.
They're not even people.
It's just weird. and we see that we see kind of a few things from the basket man's perspective, and the basket turning over his head and allowing him to see from different perspectives. So we think that these robots, that we don't know how many there are. I think the most we've seen at once is 3.
Yeah, I think there's only 3. We haven't seen any more than 3. And
they do bring up, though, because he said how many are there, and one of David's colleagues from the old place was like, we don't know.
Okay.
So it might just be 3 there out in the open.
Right, yeah.
So that's what's going on there in section 13. Trying to think of other kind of things going on.
Well, the Shadow King attacks section 13 because David gives him the location. David basically betrays them, and he ends up killing a few soldiers. But then, the merging, that one character, the old guy who's merged with the young girl, their merging gets messed up or something.
Yeah.
Inverted.
I think both their names start with a K. It's the same name, but it's a gender neutral name.
Right.
I can't remember their name though.
Yeah, I can't remember names right now, so I'm sorry if I'm not giving character names, but it's
we'll call it Scientist K and Fighter K.
There's so much to process in the show. People's names were the last thing I was focusing on.
But yeah, so it's always that Scientist K had always been the home, the receptacle for Fighter K to live inside of, and she only kind of came out at certain moments, and now that's been reversed.
Yeah, that's been reversed.
And as a result, Fighter K is kind of distraught about basically having to live through the boring moments of life, but at the same time she seems to be aging rapidly.
Yes. Yeah, at the same time, when they finally do manage to separate again, you notice that her hair is starting to turn white.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what's going on there. Again, what our plot threads are there?
There's isn't it Melanie? Is it her name? That's was the leader of the group before.
Yes.
She's kind of despondent about how everything turned out.
Everything, with Oliver. That Oliver has been hijacked by a Shadow King and he's gone, and she's despondent over that.
She's kind of lost faith in the whole save the world machinations, and is basically seemingly trying to push David and his girlfriend towards you guys could just leave.
Just giving up and just going off and having a life together or something, she suggests.
Yeah. And she's just despondent of the kind of lifestyle of having to live every day as if, the world's going to end. So we need to be on edge. And how everything turned out with her and Oliver has kind of left her in that despondent state.
Right, exactly.
Meanwhile, we have Burned Face Man, who was one of the major antagonists of the last season.
Yeah, he was the major human antagonist of last season, let's say.
Yes. Besides the mutant guy or Lenny. But he's having to kind of have this peace with David. He's suspicious of David. I mean, rightfully so, because David is kind of lying to everybody. But he doesn't trust David. And at the same time, he's having to deal with the idea that he has to try to be friendly and warm and open to this guy who basically destroyed his face and almost killed him.
Right.
Which was one of the more like moments in I think the first season, when you saw kind of from his perspective what it was like after being burned, and finding out that oh, well, he's gay and his lover has been struggling with him through all of this, and the kind of the effect it had on them together, and it kind of humanizes him a lot more.
Right, exactly.
And so now you kind of have this perspective of him still acting a bit antagonistic and tough, but kind of being in the right in everything he's saying, because David is kind of lying to everybody. But at the same time, we know David can't just tell everybody, oh, I had a vision of somebody from the future that told me to help our enemy.
Right. He's trying to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
No, in fact, it's not till the end of episode 2 that he spills it to current timeline version of his girlfriend,
He's a little hurt at first that he didn't reveal to her, but then he's like, well, then how could I tell you without betraying you from the future?
Yeah.
You know, like
and he's like, wait, is it a secret that I had to keep from you because it came from you? It's like, I don't know the rules behind this.
yeah. So those are kind of like the machinations going behind the scenes. So basically, there's a hunt for the Shadow King's body.
Yep.
The Shadow King wants it so he can, be free and, use all of his power as negatively as he wants. David and his future girlfriend, they want him to have it because of some, threat that's going to be coming in the future that's far greater than the Shadow King, likely David himself from what we think. And then the Section 13 wants it in order to keep the Shadow King from coming to power. They want to like hide it or destroy it. They want it out of reach of the Shadow King. And so that's kind of where everything's going. There's this like hunt for this body. And because of these like weird connections now with like, future David's girlfriend telling him to help the Shadow King, you kind of have this like weird fragile alliance with the Shadow King, where at first David when he had spilled the beans about where Section 13 was to the Shadow King, he told him no killing, no death. And Shadow King just ignored that and murdered a bunch of people. Now David's like meeting up with him again and it said like, I want your word from you, from the actual Shadow King, like no more murders. This is done. And he gets it. So now they have this kind of like fragile alliance going on. At the same time as all of this, there's all these people that have been coming down with some kind of a psychic illness that have been surrounded by the Shadow King, presumably by something the Shadow King did to them, but it's not really fully explained.
Or they're like frozen and they're chattering their teeth. That's like super creepy.
Yeah. And then hiding amongst them, we find out is this monk who seems to be somebody who knows where the Shadow King's body is. Like the keeper of the Shadow King's body is like aware of it or something. And this is who everyone's looking for. And he's hiding amongst the chattering people at Section 13.
Right.
So that's kind of where the story's moving forward now. It's kind of like exploring Section 13 itself, trying to find this monk, trying to find the Shadow King's body, and exploring the idea of what this other threat could be as we slowly approach the time, which is 1 week from the point of the first episode of the current timeline, in which David, in the regular timeline before, had killed the Shadow King. That's kind of the plot threads moving forward, presented in the most crazy, surrealistic ways imaginable.
Definitely like a dream. Like if they turned like a dream into a TV show, because it's like random non sequitur like imagery, and you're just constantly changing scenes, changing focus, stuff's happening. It really does. It really is structured like a dream, where like you go from one thing to another with like no transition, no logic or rhyme or reason. Mm-hmm. And I think that's done very deliberately, and it's a very good effect for this show.
We'll have to see how it pays off by the end, because I know there's got to be some people that are already doubting it. They're like, oh, it's jumped the shark, it's gone too far, stuff like that. I think you and I are a little bit more tolerant to that kind of stuff. I mean, we were huge fans of Hannibal. You kind of had to enjoy the surreal aspects of filmmaking to enjoy a show like that. So I have hopes, I also have a lot of faith in Noah Hawley, who is the showrunner for Legion, based on what he did with the first season, but also what he's done with Fargo. I have a lot of hopes in him to tell a compelling story. That doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get great resolutions and like, we know what all of this meant all along. And because Fargo is not really like that. Fargo leaves a lot open, but I think I have a lot of faith in him just keeping me compelled as he tells a story. So I'm just kind of going along for the ride.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. I'm compelled. I mean, I'm enjoying it. I don't know about you.
I am enjoying it. Yeah.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see where they go next. If they're gonna, because there seems like I had mentioned, there seems to be kind of like a structure to the season's like episodes, or each one kind of like around the middle of the episode will have this kind of like educational point about psychology, and like the transitions to that and how that kind of feeds in. If this is like this kind of ongoing structure, the first season kind of really didn't have anything like that. Like it would change format like drastically. Like all of a sudden it would be like a silent movie, and then it would be like not like that anymore. Like it just kind of like would randomly change different aspects. This one seems a little bit more structured, even as like it's gotten more surreal. So I wonder how long that's going to be a part of it.
Right.
But that's pretty much it for Legion. We're going to be talking about the rest of the season as the episodes come out. Next week, we're also going to be adding Lost in Space to our rotation of shows. And the week after that, we're going to be adding Westworld into our rotation of shows to talk about. So we'll be talking about those three are going to be our spring shows of discussion. But until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. So today, as we're recording this, it is Friday, April 13th. And today, Relic hit Cinemax. It's a Killer spelled backward. It's a show from the brothers that are behind the Missing, which is a really good British show. I'm interested to see how this series goes because it's like a murder story or like a investigator into a serial killer that goes like backwards, like the story's told backwards.
Right.
So it starts with them catching the killer, and then it goes backwards as you see like how the investigation started, how the crime started, everything like that. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Bosch is back on Amazon for another season. Chef's Table Pastry has debuted on Netflix. And as we had mentioned, we're going to be talking about next week, Lost in Space dropped on Netflix. On this Sunday, April 15th, 2018, Fear the Walking Dead is back on AMC. On Monday, April 16th, 2018, Supergirl is back on the CW. On Tuesday, April 17th, The Chalet airs on Netflix. Kind of have no idea what that is. Nor do I then on the next day, on Thursday, April 19th, another show hits Netflix called Charité. I'm not sure.
Okay, I don't know what that is.
I think they might both be some of Netflix's pushes into foreign content, so I don't know.
Oh, maybe.
And then on Friday, April 20th, 2018, The Originals returns on the CW. I believe this is its final season. Agretsuko debuts on Netflix. I think that's an anime series. And Spy Kids Mission Critical, a new TV series on Netflix based on the Spy Kids movies. So that's what's coming up in the week ahead. As we mentioned, a week after that, or the Sunday after that, if this list had gone on to reveal up to Sunday, I'd be talking about Westworld too. So I know a lot of people that listen to this might be kind of most excited about the return of that, as I think you and I are, Will.
Yes. Yeah, super excited.
But yeah, so that's it. Thank you everybody for listening. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, TVEnthusiast.com. And you can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. The entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel, TV Enthusiast Tuning Out.
Nice.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@TVEnthusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more